Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to another episode of electricairmobility.news. Today we're going to talk about something we've already kind of talked about, but we're digging a little bit more into the topic, and that is, what are vertiports? What do they look like? How do they function? And mostly, what do they mean? So this is a two-part article because, as always, I always have great ideas and I start writing it, and all of a sudden it's becoming a behemoth of an article. So I cut it in two in this case again. So this is really part one of how will vertiports change the way we travel, and believe me, they will change. My name is Nicholas Zart, and I have been around for roughly about 20 years, at least 17 professionally within electric mobility. I started out and still am a consultant, but also as a journalist in electric mobility. So originally it was around electric vehicles, so I got to see a lot of companies start, even Tesla before Elon Musk. I've seen a lot of companies do well. I've seen some companies not do as well. So I've learned a lot of things over the years, which really makes me a great example to work with when it comes to what do you need to do in order to be successful in electric mobility. Now, in 2014, I noticed that a Swiss company called Dufour, at the time they were called Dufour Hamilton, today they're called Dufour Aerospace, started flying an electric Acrobat airplane with a Siemens electric drivetrain for about a half hour with a 15-minute reserve. To me, that was really the beginning of what I call electric air mobility. And it launched, I mean, it actually didn't launch my career. It switched my career over from EVs, so land EVs, to electric aircraft. Now, at the time, we called it eVTOLs for electric vertical takeoff and landing, and urban air mobility, UAM. And somewhere along the line, NASA in 2017 decided, 2018, 2017, somewhere around there, decided that we should use the acronym Advanced Air Mobility, AAM, because that meant everything around all of that. Since now we're talking about regional air mobility, we're talking about electric shore takeoff and landing, eSTOL, and electric conventional takeoff and landing aircraft. So AAM is a big, encapsulated version of what we do, but we specifically, us here, sorry, right here, we do really the electric air mobility part of it. And then yes, that does include hydrogen, because for the most part, hydrogen in eVTOLs and eSTOLs and eCTOLs will be used as a way to produce electricity for electric motors. All right, I kind of a long way around to explain who I am, but in this first part of the article, I wanted to make sure that you understood how complex really vertiports are. And just like an airport, when you look at an airport, most of the time you'll see a terminal, two terminals, you'll see parking lots, you'll see a runway or two, and then you'll see a bunch of airplanes, right? Well, there's a lot more that goes on, obviously, behind the scenes. There's staffing, there's security, there's traffic management, both on the ground, in the air, and the approach part of it. There's also the energy aspect of it. Kerosene needs to be brought to the airplanes. And there's also electricity that needs to be plugged into the airplane so that their turbofans don't run idly, creating more pollution and just sucking up kerosene for no reason, right? So there's a hell of a lot more that goes on behind the scenes. Vertiports are exactly the same. Now, at first glance, you might see a terminal, or in the case of a vertistop, just a shelter, a landing pad or more, and maybe a charging station a little bit in the distance, and a hydrogen fuel station. But it's a little bit more than that. There are also management systems. There's different types of energy that we will have at different types of vertiports, and a heck of a lot more, including unmanned or uncrewed. Now we don't say unmanned anymore, we say uncrewed traffic management and air traffic management, which is more on the passenger side of things. So since we talked about vertiports, know that in general we kind of break it down into three types of vertiports. Vertistops, that's usually about one vertipad where the aircraft will land and take off, maybe two at most, but not necessarily a full-fledged terminal, maybe even just a a shelter from the elements, from rain or the sun, for passengers coming in or coming out. And think of it in many ways just like a bus stop on a network, right? Um, I think about it also, maybe also like a train stop, I would think, between one big a train station to another, and you have these smaller little stops in between. Those would be the vertistops, and they most likely will not have any kind of energy solutions, at least not in the beginning. We foresee at some point where there might be an inductive charging system on the vertipad so that when the aircraft lands, it can recharge and then take off again later. We'll get to the vertipad solutions a little bit later. After that, we have a bigger version of these vertistops. And again, one thing that Electric Air Mobility LLC does really well is that everything that we design it to grow. It needs to be scalable. So essentially, any vertistop needs to grow into a vertiport, which is a bigger version of that, and then eventually could become a vertihub. So a vertistop is, if the difference between a vertistop and a vertiport is a vertistop has maybe one, maybe two landing strip, maybe a terminal, probably no energy solutions. A vertiport will definitely have more than one or two vertipads, up to maybe 5. We'll have at least a terminal, could be a small, medium-sized terminal, and we'll have energy solutions. Now, what we mean by energy solutions, and we'll dive a little bit more into that later, is have electricity, hydrogen, and what we call sustainable aviation fuel, SAF or SAF. Once that grows into a bigger vertiport, now we're thinking about a hub, right? Think of the Atlanta airport, LAX, New York, London, Paris, so on and so forth. These big kind of airports. These are hub airports, and they feed to spokes, and the spokes would be vertiports. So the vertihub, yep, will be a lot of landing vertipads. So we're thinking 5 to 10 to maybe 15, maybe more than one terminal, 2, 3, who knows, maybe even 5, depending on size and available area and land. It will have definitely a lot of charging stations. It'll have a substantial hydrogen system for production, storage, and refueling. And also, these guys at one point or another might have even more renewable energy incorporated within, again, if there is enough space. So think of solar panels everywhere. Think of any kind of renewable energy that is feasible within that given space. So there you go. You have an idea of the 3 different types of vertiports out there. Suffice it to say that these vertiports will grow in size. We'll start obviously with vertistops here and there, maybe a vertiport that will act as a sort of vertihub, but that's going to be the next 5 to 10 years. And within about 10 years, we'll start to see places where a vertiport can really start to morph into a vertihub. And the difference between, if you think about it at the terminal level, which we'll dive into it later, is truly a vertistop might have a vending machine. That's about it, right? But a vertiport might have a little bit more amenities, at least, beverages and grab a lunch or dinner or something like that. But a vertihub should theoretically have restaurants, should have maybe even a grocery stores and local shops with their products and services, also probably available at the vertiport level. So all of this obviously requires energy, and a lot of energy. All of these are electric aircraft, so they will need, at the very least, electricity, which means we now need electric charging stations. Now, the original drawings that we saw with vertiports, including, vertihubs, always had a charging station right next to a vertipad. Wrong. That will not happen, right? Because we need a certain landing funnel in the air to make sure that the aircraft can come in, hover, and touch down, right? Most eVTOLs are not going to drop down 500 meters or 100 meters or even 100 feet in the air all the way down to the vertipad. So that means everything needs to be clear away from it, including the terminal, which would be a certain walking distance. And yes, we've thought of everything when it comes to wheelchairs and walking apparatus. So right now we have charging stations, let's call them Generation 1 charging stations out there. Beta Technologies, a great partner of Electric Air Mobility LLC, has one that's pretty amazing right now, and we've written about it. It offers anywhere from 40 to a little over 300 kilowatt of power. And it's ready to roll out right now. In fact, they received their UL certificate, and if you know what that means, that's actually a pretty good seal of approval as far as quality assurance. And we wrote an article on that. Hopefully, I will be able to write it somewhere in there in the YouTube ticker part of it. But this is really Generation 1. You know, we're looking at Generation 2. What will happen when we need to charge more than one eVTOL? What happens when you need to charge 5 eVTOLs? And what will happen when we need to charge EVs that come and park at the vertiports? Now we need multi-charging modality charging stations that have a very high throughput. So right now, the amperage on these Generation 1 are about up to 600 amps. Volatus Infrastructure says that they're working on 700 amps, but next generation we're looking at 1,000 to 10,000 amps. Why so high? Well, it's because eVTOLs will draw a lot more amperage than a regular EV. But if you think eVTOLs draw a big amperage, eSTOLs will draw an even bigger amount of amps, and of course eCTOLs even bigger. Now we're talking about 4,000 to 5,000 amps just to charge an eCTOL, right? And these are not official numbers, they're just the grapevine numbers. So we've partnered with a lot of these companies that offer right now Generation 1. We're working with these other companies that are working on Generation 2 chargers out there. And we are talking to utilities, of course, know how to do Generation 3, you know, the 20,000 and above amps kind of chargers. They know how to do that. So again, technology is never the problem. What is the problem, and it's a good problem to have, is finding the business model to make sure we can actually do this and to have certification for it, which is, of course, a good problem to have. We want things to be safe and efficient. Of course, electricity is not going to be the only thing that we'll have at these vertiports. A lot of the eVTOLs that we see out there, even eSTOLs and eCTOLs that we see out there, are being developed with hybrid powertrains. When what that means is that they will use some sort of liquid fuel. So it could be sustainable aviation fuel, it could be even Jet A in the beginning, and it could also mean hydrogen, which can come both in a liquid format or in a gas format, right? So when it comes to hydrogen, we're working with some incredibly innovative startups and OEMs that have systems that basically fit within an international shipping container, right? And that can be either on the ground, again, far away from the landing area of any eVTOLs, or can be buried underground, right? Same thing with charging stations, by the way. Now, we've talked about charging stations, we've talked about hydrogen, so now we got to talk about storage. Storage is a huge and important part of what we're going to be doing. Storage means that we need to store electricity that we, again, use at night when it's plentiful from the utilities. It's usually a little bit more affordable, and we're going to store enough of it to use for tomorrow and, of course, have a reserve. Same thing with hydrogen. We're going to create hydrogen at night, again, from utilities because the electricity is more plentiful and more affordable. But that also means that we're going to use renewable energies, if possible, either nearby or on-site, to help us create some of that energy, electricity, to make both electricity and hydrogen storage. Again, using it tomorrow. So this is going to be very important to keep in mind, and we'll go into why a little bit later. This really is the end of part one. The part two, I'm going to talk a little bit more on the storage aspect of it and why it's so important to think about this. I'm going to talk also mostly about terminal designs and how they're so different from airports and heliports. And then the most important part of it, and if infrastructure is the glue to advance air mobility, meaning Without infrastructure, there is no advanced air mobility. Well, management, data analysis is really the glue of the glue itself. The glue of the infrastructure of the vertiport is the brain. How do we make sure that we understand who's coming in from where, what they will need, where they are going, how much energy is needed, what passengers are coming through security, employees, maintenance centers, and so on and so forth. So we hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, please like and subscribe. Share this channel. It's brand new. It's only 3 months old. I'm really excited to see that we're getting close to 100 subscribers, and at that point I'll be able to change the name of the channel. But please feel free to share it and spread it amongst yourselves. And I'd be very happy to hear what you have to say about this. I'm always happy to hear your thoughts and comments. And again, you can always reach out to us directly here, or I'm not going to give my email address because Lord knows what that's going to do. But just give us your thoughts and comments here. That'll be fantastic. Again, my name is Nicholas Zart. I am the founder and CEO of Electric Air Mobility LLC, and I'm excited to provide these educational pieces around advanced air mobility. And we look forward to the second series tomorrow, where we'll talk about design, terminals, and much more. Thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.